Hey guys, welcome back to another Excuse podcast. I'm your host, Byron Greeley, and today's guest is James Fleming. James is the founder of the Power Within Training, which is a business that facilitates training programs through all different levels of management in corporate and small businesses. We have a great conversation today where James explains how he took the leap from a really great cushy job to starting his own thing and taking risks, and how the first 2 years were really tough and he considered quitting. We also chat about how their programs get buy-in from everyone involved and how they actually facilitate change. He shares so many stories about how we all share fears and doubts and what the best way is to take action and start moving forward, and how one small change in the business enabled them to double in growth for 4 years in a row. It's a great conversation. I learned a lot, and I think you will too. Enjoy the show. Hey James, thank you so much for joining me today. To kick us off, could you tell us a bit about your business, the Power Within Training?
Yeah, of course. First of all, thank you for inviting me on your podcast. I'm really looking forward to it, Byron. Yeah, so I'm first of all, I'm the managing director of the Power Within Training and Development. We are a small family-owned leadership development company. But what makes us probably different from another leadership company out there is what the framework that we use to implement the changes, whether it's leadership development, business growth, business coaching. And we use a framework called motivational intelligence. And it's considered the third most important, or the most important level of intelligence that we humans have at our disposal.
Oh, that's so interesting. Could you go a bit deeper into motivational intelligence and tell us exactly what it is?
Absolutely, absolutely. So it's based on the latest in neuroscience research through Carol Dweck, David Conman, Dr. David McClellan, and a few others. So based on their research around what motivates a human, for example, Byron, why does someone always, no matter what type of adversity they're faced against, no matter what kind of challenges they're put up against, they're always able to rise above, go over it, go under it, or go round about. They always find a way, right? And then you have the other person, same background, same upbringing, can even be brother, sister, brother, brother, twins. And the other person is they're always just able to overcome adversity. They're able to get out of their own head. And that's our motivational intelligence. It's us being able to identify and manage those negative thoughts and self-limiting beliefs that tell us, don't be silly, Byron, like you can't do that. That little voice. And by the way, we all have a little voice, Byron. And if you don't have a little voice, it's a little voice that's saying, I don't have a little voice. That little voice inside us that we're able to overcome that voice and achieve our goals or objectives in life. That's what motivational intelligence is.
Right, that makes sense. And what caused you or motivated you to start a business like this?
Oh, it's a great question. So I would go all the way back, but I'll go back to about 15, 16 years ago. I was leading a small team, I was a country manager. I was leading a small team, and I knew that I was sitting in a boardroom and I was talking to my team and I was telling them all the things that I wanted them to do, and I was telling them all the things that we were going to achieve this year. And I remember leaving that boardroom and everybody was buzzing. We'll call it, everybody was kind of motivated. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But nothing happened. Nothing changed. We went about a normal big day to work. We had the same challenges. People weren't rising. And I remember a few months later thinking, what's wrong with these people? What was wrong with these people? They don't understand. Now, it wasn't just people for the UK. I was, in my team, there were people from all over the world. We had Indians, we had Canadians, Americans, Venezuelans. And I'm thinking, what's wrong with these people? And I realized at that moment, it wasn't what's wrong with them. It was what was wrong with me. It was my communication. I had never sat down and actually asked them, what is it you want to do? Where is your biggest challenges? How can we accomplish that? So as most leaders or managers do, they go in and they tell people what we're going to do, and they tell everybody. And there's a great saying by Confucius, and it's, tell me and I will forget, involve me and I will remember. And that led me on to, I started to research successful people. So I did a lot of research on what made people successful. Why are some people always able to rise to the top? You know, all I was looking at, and there's a lot of determining factors, particularly if you look at sports people, because they've generally got athletic abilities and genetic advantages. But in general, right? In general, it's just what's going up in our heads. It's just that voice. And that was the difference between successful people and people who just got by. They were able to identify the things that mattered the most, the things that they knew they driven the highest value, and they focused on that. And they stopped letting the little voice tell them, just because we don't know how to, just because I don't know yet, they give up too easy. And I think the world is like that. And that was the spurring moment when I realized that all the leadership courses that I had been on previously, all the leadership courses that I'd been sending my people on, they were going away for 3-4 days, and they were coming back with a nice fancy leadership certificate. I am a leader. And nothing changed. Nothing. And I thought, I think I can do it better. So I did.
Awesome. And who who are the types of people that you normally work with?
Well, that's quite varied, because we work with micro businesses, but we also work with large corporate organizations, and everything in between. So we work with managing directors of smaller businesses. We work with managing directors of large organizations and businesses, you know, s- senior leadership team, management team. So really, really the way that our products are developed, we have products for senior leadership team who have certain challenges. We have products what we call managing with MQ. So the management team, when we do have to tell and direct a lot, how do we do it correctly? And then we have programs all the way around, right down to entry level, and it's called self leadership. So when you come into a business or organization, how can I drive my own career? How can I hit the ground running so I'm not worried and panicking about, oh, I don't know this and I don't know that? We've all experienced that. So we actually work with all levels, Byron.
Wow. That's so interesting. And so, like, what does working with these clients look like? I'm sure it's very varied because you have so many different sort of packages and different a range of clientele. But is the process sort of doing a better job at leadership training than your experience, which is why you got into it in the first place?
Absolutely. So I talk about leading in the 21st century. That's kind of our premise, because the way that we used to lead, in fact, if you had to transport somebody, right, a senior leader from the 1950s or 60s, and you had to transport them into till today, and they would look at the way the leadership style, not a lot has changed, but the world has changed. People
True.
have changed. We want different things from life. So leaders now need to be much more in touch with their people. They need to, really, they want authentically want to help and support their people. Because what we stereotypically think of leaders is someone who sits at the top of a business or organization and tells people this is all the things that we're going to do. And that's not leadership. Leadership is about inspiring people to want to be better, to want to do better. To some people can't even see it. Some people they can't even see that vision, and that's a leader's job, is to make other people see the vision, to see their own potential, and then support them through that learning phase. Because we're going to get it wrong. Mistakes are okay because that's how we learn. So it's all of those things, Byron. It's really leaders need to understand, like the world. Think about the world. If you go back 20, 30 years ago, how many females were in business versus now? You look at millennials, or Gen Z, they want completely different things from life. Now, if you're a leader, a senior leader in a business organization, and you're not able to tap into that and understand it, you're at a loss. Your career won't go very far, or your business won't go very far. So it's really about empowering leaders for the new generation, for the 21st century, to go on and lead with purpose and passion and authenticity. Be yourself. That's really the kind of key thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I'm curious, you touched on sort of managing or leading millennials versus Gen Z. Um, do some leaders actually struggle with that? Because they do want completely different things. So as a manager, I can imagine it being quite difficult to cater to everyone's sort of wants, needs, and sort of what drives them as an individual.
Absolutely, it's and the thing is, well, leader, the key here is for a person, a leader who's trying to understand what the problem is if a leader sometimes will get it, but they have this team of we'll call them mid-level management, and they've probably worked their way through a business or organization. They probably had very little training, so their only experience of how to manage people is how they were managed. And again, if you go back, 10, 15, 20 years, and most of these people consider management was about telling people what to do. You've
Yeah.
got to do this and you've got to do it this way and do it that way. That's not leadership. Leadership is not telling people what to do. Leadership is about asking. So if I ask you, and I try to find out a bit about you and I try to find out a little bit more, and I'm doing that with my management team and I'm teaching my management team how to properly communicate, then they will in turn will start to talk to their people. And if you're doing this at both top down and bottom up, eventually everybody is talking the same communication language. And that's what we're trying to show, because you cannot be everything to everyone. We're not counselors. We've got a job to do. We've got revenue to make. We've got profitability, but that none of them will ever happen unless we change the way that we lead our people. And by the way, leadership is any level of the organization. You can be a leader on the shop floor, or you can be a leader in the pet house suite. You can be a leader at any level of the organization. And that's what NQ leadership is all about. It's about developing leaders at every level of your organization so that eventually you all use the same communication language.
Yeah. And speaking of organizations, how big is yours at the moment? How big is your company?
We have 18 staff. So there's myself and my wife, who's the business partner, and 16 other staff members, trainers, coaches, marketing psychologists. Because we're obviously what we do is in the cutting edge of psychology. We've got psychologists, business psychologists that work for us, constantly looking at, the predictive brain theory and all the different theories of neuroscience and neuroplasticity out there to make sure that we're always, really focusing on what makes people tick. So quite a small team, but a really strong team.
But in our previous call, you did mention that the business has been growing relatively quickly over the last few years. And I'm curious, what's been the driver in that growth?
So the first 3 years was basically me and my wife. It was the first two and a half years. We had one staff member, kind of junior, kind of admin person. Excuse me, kind of junior admin person in, and I think it was in the third year. And the business, like every business, right? There's no such thing as a silver bullet to success, right? It's about really understanding your market and really believing in your content and never giving up. So those first 3 years were what I call the foundation years. That was me going out to the market and looking at what's out there. And luckily, I was able to see, because remember, I lived in the Middle East. So sorry to rewind back. Most of my career was spent outside of the UK. I lived in the Middle East for 12 years. I lived in Malaysia, Africa, Australia. So I had a really broad view of what leadership should be. So when I moved back to the UK to start the business in 2017, I had no idea what the wants and needs were for the UK market. So I went out there and went to every networking event I could. And what I realized I spent a lot of money in my own personal development. And I realized that what an incredible opportunity, because most of the training was absolutely terrible. It was rehashed stuff that somebody had seen online, and it was terrible. And I thought, okay, this is the path we're going down. So anyway, first 3 years, mostly micro businesses. We worked with business owners, and we just kept plugging away. And then in year 3, that we seen the business turn around. COVID, that was COVID. So year 3 was our COVID year.
Yep.
And all our training used to be face to face, done in local hotels or businesses. But we went fully digital. Obviously, we couldn't go to hotels. And we actually doubled our revenue
Oh,
and our
wow.
headcount during COVID.
Wow.
So when we started to come out of COVID, we were fully digital. We had our own LMS. We had our own coaching platform. So when we came out of COVID, kind of the first 18 months, we were hitting, we were way ahead in most of our competition. And we doubled in size the following year. And then we doubled in size the following year. So we doubled in size 4 years in a row, both headcount and revenue.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
amazing. It's so interesting how something that can seem like a setback, like COVID, for most people, could actually be a catalyst for a complete new pivot and direction for a business.
Absolutely. And pivot's the word. I know it's overused during COVID, but I was able to think to myself, okay, I've created all of this stuff. It hasn't gone away. The customers haven't gone. And I kind of thought about, I wonder what they're experiencing right now. Now, remember, everybody's at home. They're working from home. They've got a lot more spare time because I'm not traveling to work. So I used that knowing that people have more time to my advantage.
Yeah.
And I went in and sold these training programs to corporate organizations. Say, look, you've got a big challenge. People are working from home. It's new. Let me help support you. Let us do some leadership development training, some self-development training for your team, some sales training for your team. Great idea. We'll give you a reduced cost because we do it fully online. And that was just that. And when we came out of COVID, we never changed our model. We just kept our digitalization model.
Awesome. Yeah, that's really, really cool. And now I'd like to sort of rewind a bit to, you touched on it a bit about when you noticed an opportunity and thought that you could do it better. But as you touched on, you were running, well, you were in a really successful career. And I'm curious at what point or what switched for you to decide, you noticed the opportunity, but to actually decide, okay, I'm going to leave this opportunity and start my own thing.
Oh, another great question. So I probably need to rewind back to a similar point in my career, because I already started to look at successful people and what makes people successful. And so I was already in that path of development myself. I was trying to really understand what made me work. Never mind what made people work. What was going on in my head, and why was I able to overcome obstacles and challenges, and I was in operations, right? I worked for a large oil and gas company. In fact, I think the second largest oil and gas company in the world. And I'd been promoted quite quickly through the business organization. And I was one of the youngest, country directors that the company had had. I was 32, and I was, a really senior person in this business organization. Anyway, and I was really good at what I did. I was really good with people, and I was really good at understanding where we were going wrong. And I did that by talking to people, asking really good questions. And I was able to kind of evaluate. And I remember they moved me to a country called Saudi Arabia, right? So they moved me to Saudi and to kind of help grow and develop the business. And when I moved there, we were, maybe a 100 million business. And within a really quick time, I was able to turn the business around, within about 3 or 4 years, to a $700 million business. So
Wow.
I'd gained quite a good name for myself. And then I remember one day, the vice president of the company, and we came over to Saudi, and we were celebrating this massive year we had had. And he came up and he tapped me on the shoulder, Byron, and he said, "James, you're moving to Dubai." And then he walked away and left me. I was like, "What? Like what happened there?" Anyway, the next day, I went into my boss's office and said, "Look, Khaled just dropped his bombshell on me. He said that I'm moving. to Dubai. I don't want to move to Dubai. I've not finished what I've started. And I wanted to take this, this business to, $1 million plus and blah, blah, blah. And my boss basically says, look, Khaled wants to move you to Dubai to an HR role. Well, I nearly dropped. I thought, what the hell do I know about HR? Anyways, so I fought against it. I said I didn't want to do it, but ultimately, Khaled got his way and he moved me across to Dubai. And the role was talent and career development manager for Middle East and Africa. So I moved into this role. Now, remember, I'd spent, the last kind of 9-10 years in operations. So when we used to look at HR, we always thought, that's them that just keep giving us work to do that doesn't drive value to the business. So I remember having that mindset when I moved into the role, and I thought, okay, I'm going to do it different. I'm actually going to sit down with these leaders and sit down with it. Obviously, I'd built a reputation, so I knew most of them. And I'd sit down and say, look, what's the biggest issue with your talent development and your career development? What was it called? And he said, everyone was like, time. Like, we're trying to run a business. We're a high stakes, high demanding business. Oil and gas is big, you get something wrong in oil and gas. It's not going to cost you a couple 100,000. It's going to cost you hundreds of millions. So it's quite a high stake environment. And I said, I'll tell you what to do. Why don't you identify a high potential employee, some young man or woman who's coming up through the business organization, quite early years of the career, and why don't we make them the kind of owner of this? So basically, they'll liaise direct with you, they'll own the process, and then what they can do is they can then identify people in their team, high potential employees, and start to build this kind of matrix organization around talent management and career development. And they all thought, whoa, this is a brilliant idea. So we can get all the benefits, but without putting in the effort, because we're making this matrix thing. So anyway, when I moved into the role in 2011, we were the 7th worst region in the world for development, career development, and talent management. And within 6 months of me putting this new approach, we were number 1 across the globe.
Wow.
And we stayed number 1 for, I think, 2 years. So that was the first inclination. I thought, I'm really good at this, getting people to overcome their self-limiting beliefs.
Yeah.
And what I learned was sometimes it's just a matter of sitting down and asking them. So tell me, Byron, what is it? What drives you? What matters to you? What is it that you really want to do in the next 3 to 5 years? Why do you come to work? And some of these people were saying, James, in 19 years, no one's ever asked me that. And all of a sudden, I was starting to get to the real emotional stuff, the people, why they came to work and what was next in their career. And then we put a development plan in place. But it was up to them to own it. Here's your development plan. Here's how you're going to move forward. If you complete that, I will guarantee you will move forward in your career. So that was the first, I suppose, real trigger that I was pretty damn good at creating programs that were able to overcome people's, kind of limiting beliefs and obstacles. So that was one big one. And then another one was we got all our management team into Dubai one day, and I said to them, I'm investing all this money and all this training and development, and we're not getting any return. Like I've increased our budget, but we've got no return, and I don't understand. And one guy stood up and he says, I'll tell you why, James. He says, because see all this sales and leadership training, it doesn't work for us. So that's okay if you work in finance, or that's okay if you work in manufacturing, but it won't work for oil and gas. And that's when the penny dropped. I thought, people will never, ever adopt a new idea, best practice, or change, right?
Yeah.
Unless you think it's a good idea, you're capable of the results, and then what's in it for me? So that personal buy-in. And at that moment, I thought, okay, this is why most training programs fail, because people don't buy in. They go along because they're told to go along, and they probably have a really nice time and a really nice day buying and really nice food, and they come out with a really nice certificate. But they go to work on a Monday morning or in the Middle East on a Sunday, depends whereabouts you are. They go to work on a Monday or a Sunday, and everything they've just learned, it's gone because it hasn't bypassed their filter. It hasn't went into their subconscious mind, and they don't actually believe that they're capable of results. So change just basically stops dead in its tracks. So that was a triggering mechanism. Those two things coming together, I thought, okay, I can do better here.
And then after that realization, did you take the leap right away, or how did that happen?
Well, not initially. So after the realization, because I was frightened. I didn't know how. I was making all this money. I was in $250,000 salary, and I had a fancy house and fancy car in Dubai, and I was traveling the world, and I suppose I had convinced myself that I had this perfect life, right? I convinced myself that I was living this dream, and I was getting more unhappier, and I was getting more unhappier, and I had more money than I'd ever had in my life, but I was just unhappy. And I remember I said to my wife, I told my wife, and I says, "Look, I am miserable." I was crying actually one day, and I was like, "I am miserable." And I had read an article on LinkedIn. Now, this is going back to 2014, 2015. And I read an article on LinkedIn, and it was about a palliative nurse. I don't know if a palliative nurse looks after the people, elderly who are dying, they're ending their life care.
Yeah.
And there's a study on it, and she interviewed, I think, over 100 people who were at the end of their life. And their biggest regrets in life were not being true to themselves, living a life that other people wanted rather than what they wanted. And I was reading this, and I was in tears. And I was looking at it, I thought, that's me. I'm living this life, and it just does not align with who I am any longer. It did initially, but it wasn't aligning with who I was. And by the way, I loved my job. Like, I absolutely loved my job, but I was miserable. So anyway, I phoned my wife, and I says, "I'm really unhappy and I don't want to do it." But she says, "What is it you want to do?" And I says, "I want to start my own company." She says, "Well, let's do it." So that was the kind of catalyst. It was her saying, "Let's do it." That was the catalyst for that change. And then we packed our bags. There's a little bit more in it, but you probably a 2-hour podcast. I told you the whole story, but we basically packed our bags, moved back to the UK, and we set our company up in 2017.
Amazing. And you said that the first 3 years were quite tough. What were those early days like? Were there any doubts that you were doing the wrong thing, or like questioning why you'd made this decision or things like that?
Yeah. So first of all was, what the hell am I going to do? Because remember, both me and my wife had given up salaries.
Yeah.
We had money in the bank, but we didn't have a huge. We had money. We'd probably over 100 grand that we thought, okay, this will see as well to start up the business. But I came back and I bought a new car, so that 100 grand was going down quite quickly. And I quickly realized that people actually don't give a shit about what you do or why you do it. Right? People really don't care. So those early years, we made a lot of mistakes. The first year, I went through a really big personal development. I studied NLP and things like that. I really wanted to make sure that I was the best out there. Like, if I was going to build leadership programs, I wanted to make sure I really understood what people needed. Um, so that first year, we invested in every single penny we had. We had a couple of clients, but not even enough to put the petrol in my car. Um, and then second year, I was having a lot of doubts. So we had a pretty good second year. We double the amount of work we had in year number one, but I was still not enough. We were literally, every penny we were making was going straight back into the business. So we're always scrimping and scraping on food and paying the mortgage and to have enough fuel in my car to go to this meeting. And it was starting to get tiring. But even though I could see what I was creating and I was building this tribe, it was tiring, and I thought, I can't keep swapping my time for money, because I was the company, and I thought I need another way for to sell to many rather than to sell to one or two. So that's when I really started to ramp up the leadership training programs and things like that. And then, as I said, COVID hit. So I did have doubts, and I remember one time I'd been offered a job to go back to oil and gas. And it was some seriously big money numbers because obviously I'd built a reputation in the sector. And I remember my wife saying to me, I said, I think I should go for it because I was fed up not having money and I was sick of struggling. And because the last 20 years I was oil and gas, all with money. And I remember my wife saying, James, you think you remember how you felt. So first of all, think about that and then don't ever give up on the vision. What it is you're trying to create and why you're trying to create it. And it's those times when I've probably been in my weakest that I've had somebody believing in me that was absolutely huge. And who I am today and who the business is today is having my wife and is this the kind of not just keep going. I think it's really important, whether it's a business partner or a wife, or you've got to have somebody that believes in you, because there's going to be days when you really don't believe in yourself.
Definitely. And would you say you're really happy with that decision looking back now?
Oh my God, I could never go back. I could never go back. I mean, our vision is to be the largest leadership company in the planet, to where motivational intelligence is what everybody, when you think about leadership, the first thing you think is, oh, we want to do that motivational intelligence training. That's the vision for the business. It's, we're moving into India. So we're moving the business. We're going to open a branch in India. We're
Well,
looking at open branches in different countries, potentially in the Middle East. So you might see motivational intelligence over in Dubai in the next
awesome.
12 to 18 months. So we've got big plans now for that growth. So the answer is, do I still get really tired? I mean, I'm one of those 6, 7 days a week kind of guys and work crazy hours, but because I love it, not
Yeah.
because I need to do it, because I still love what I do. And I always think if I'm putting in extra hours and I'm constantly developing and I'm reading the latest in science journals, I'm putting my company way ahead of the game. I'm not waiting for other people to come up and go, oh, they stole my idea. I'm going to have the idea. I'm going to drive it, and it's going to be the Power Within trainings, program. So so I've still got that passion. So that's the future. That's what I see. It just the juggernaut keeps moving forward.
Amazing. And you also have a book called You Can Have Success or Excuses, Not Both." And I'm curious, what's the most common excuse that you hear that holds people back?
We've always done it that way. We've always done it like for businesses, people in business. But we've always done it that way is a big one. And for people, for individuals, it's I don't think I can do that. Like I don't that word I can't. I mean, if you just think about I can't and I
Yeah.
can, right? One letter of a difference. I can. One opens your mind up to possibilities. One closes your mind off. So that wording is, I think we should ban it in English dictionary because that holds a lot of people back. I mean, I can even see it in my own team. Sometimes they'll say, "Oh, I don't think we can do that," and I'll say, "Why?" "Oh, it's never been done before." Exactly.
And
Let's
is that
let's
is
find a way.
yeah, so is that normally your approach to tackling those excuses? It's just asking why, going a level or two deeper to make them understand that maybe it hasn't been done before and there's an opportunity there rather than something
Absolutely.
that's limiting.
Every challenge, Byron. This is how my mind works. Every single challenge is an opportunity. You just need to find it. Everything that goes wrong, every failure is an opportunity. You just need to find it. Everything that happened, I mean, I have had some horrendous things happen us in business. I mean, we had a company who stole our content and we had to take them to court, and it cost me like 70 grand
Well,
to get my shares back in Scotland for stealing our work. But it was a lesson. I never looked at it as a money I lost. I looked at it as a pretty expensive lesson, but a real lesson on fiduciary duties as a director and having a proper joint venture agreement and having a really good, having a proper non-disclosure agreement in place when you're going to be giving people business secrets. So I learned a lot of lessons, but yeah, I don't know if I'm waffling or answering your
no,
question or not.
no, you definitely are. I'd actually love to hear about a few of those lessons. So maybe some failures and things that have happened throughout running the business.
Absolutely. So that one was trusting another company with our content. It was a joint venture we went into, and they stole our content basically and tried to sell it off as their own, thinking I'm not going to see their website anyway. So that was a very, very expensive lesson. Um, Other lessons, you know, I think what I used to, I could be very impulsive. You know, when I think something's a really good idea, I can just run with it. What I've learned over probably the last 4 or 5 years is I now no longer make decisions like that. I now sit down with my business partner and my wife, and we sit down and we go, okay, what's the implications? How did this look like? What's the opportunities here? And we always try to make sure that the opportunities outweigh the negatives. We always try and have that risk avert, kind of, we're balancing the risk. And sometimes we can't balance it, but because we think it's a good idea, we just go with it. And it generally it's worked out so far. Um, People have been some of our biggest challenges and some of our biggest risks and some of our biggest failures. Because what happens in a business, particularly if a pure startup, remember, because I moved into leadership training and I'd never done leadership training in my life. So, I was brand new. I was, green. I had no idea what the hell I was doing. I just had loads of experiences being a leader. And the people that you bring into your business in those early years are not necessarily the people who'll take your business to the next stage. And that can be quite a tough pill to swallow because you build relationships with these people. But some people, even though you give them the opportunity to grow and develop, they don't always want to take it because of that little voice. Now remember, I teach this stuff every day of our lives. But some people just you can't change all of the people all of the time. Right. And I think that those mistakes is you think you really feel let down and you think, oh, I really don't want to let them go, but you know it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And then you bring in new people and you're like, wow, all of a sudden you've got this incredible new lease of life in the business and they're taking the business to the next level. And that was a hard lesson. Holding on to people too long is probably what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And you touched on it there where you went from being a leader to never having taught leadership before, but that was the crux of the business. So I'm curious, was there any sort of imposter syndrome at play or like self doubt?
Byron, my very first training program, it was called Self Leadership Development. And I ran it. It was on the 11th of September, no, 11th of November, 2017. And I ran it. There was 12 people, business owners in the room. And there was 6 people who'd paid for tickets and 6 people I'd invited along. So I'd identified them. Oh, these are quite important people in this business. So the 6 people that paid tickets were smaller business. The other people were more corporate. And I thought, I need to trial this. I had been trialing it, doing 1-day events, but I thought I need to get some real feedback. So I remember building this, and me and my wife had locked herself away for months, building content, going out into and asking people if we can borrow their boardrooms and running, 2-hour events, trying testing some of the content until I thought, okay, we've got something that works. And I remember the morning I was absolutely shitting it. Excuse the language, but I was shitting it to present in front of people. I was terrified. And I went into the bathroom and I locked the bathroom door and I just sat and I kept trying to talk to myself. Come on, James, you can do this. Come on, come on. You're going to be, and I was trying to visualize it and I was trying to say, you will smash it. They will absolutely love your class. So I was convincing myself. And I remember walking into that room and I just went for it. I just absolutely went for it. In the first couple of hours, I was stumbling a little bit and I was forgetting stuff. But by the time my confidence, because I could see their faces, I could see the people were changing right in front of my face with the content and this. Because by the way, what we do, all our programs are stories. So we tell stories. because if you tell someone a story, they'll remember. But if you just give people, like most training courses, they give people lots of content and lots of, strategies and Maslow's hierarchy of theories, people just forget it all. So we build stories. So anyway, I'm telling all these stories and I could literally see people change in front of me. And that built my confidence up a little bit and a little bit more and a little bit more. And after that first event, I'd asked them all to give me some feedback. And the feedback we got, written feedback after the event, and the feedback we got was absolutely mind blowing. Mind blowing, like life changing, never experienced this as my life. And I'm thinking, okay, we're getting there. But you know something? The fear never leaves you, right? But you always get that feeling, even when I run a new program, I always get that kind of butterflies. But I always tell my mind I'm excited. I change the fear into an excitement because they're very closely linked. I'm almost like programming my own brain.
That makes sense. I mean,
Yeah,
Beyonce even does that. I think she has an alter ego called Sasha Fierce because she's shitting herself before she comes on stage. So she has to almost like mentally separate herself from the stage presence, and then she goes out on stage and she's able to
and
do a
that's
performance.
exactly it. You almost you become a different person. I mean, most people. I'm actually quite introvert, but most people are like, "Wow, that's just not possible because of the passion that I have."
Yeah,
And I can be really outgoing, and I think, well, how can you be outgoing but be introvert? Surely that's extrovert. And it's like my business persona. That's who I am. But this is who I am in real life. This is who I really am in real life. And then people are, but that's not authentic. No, no, it is. It is because that's who I am. I've got these two personalities.
yeah, yeah. That makes sense. One thing that you mentioned quite early on in our conversation, but it's just been in the back of my mind this whole time, is the buy-in bit, where you said normal leadership programs don't get the buy-in. No one really cares that much about it, and so that's why change doesn't really happen. I'm curious how you guys get the buy-in from the people you coach and teach.
It's how it's structured. So what we do is we start off right in every program. We start off at we call it the foundation level, right? So the really basics level of why we are the way we are. So nothing about leadership, nothing about business growth, nothing about business development, nothing about management. Just who are we as people? Why we do the things we do? How our brains work. We talk about IQ, EQ, and MQ, and how they intervene in our lives and the percentage that IQ has on our overall decision making, which is almost nothing. People think, oh no, I'm logically driven. No, you're not. You may think you are because your little voice is telling you that. So we start off with talking about really why we do the things we do. You know, and that example is human beings still to this day. So this is evolution, right? So we talk a lot about evolution and why we are the way we are. When a human being goes into an open space, they automatically feel calm. Why do you think that is? Think back
Um,
in evolution, go back millions of years when we were at the bottom of the food chain. Predators killing us. So open spaces meant we could see, so we could
True.
feel calm. Closed spaces we didn't know what was around the corner.
All
So
right.
that's how our brains still work. Even at 100 million years we've evolved. But yet our brains still work the same way today. Another quick one that to mention why this, I'm answering the question about what we do different. Every human is born with 6 universal emotions, and 4, if not 5, are negative. So we're actually born with this negative bias.
Wow.
Example, if I was your boss, Byron, and it was a Friday afternoon, and you were working on a project for me, on the Friday afternoon, I said, listen, Byron, I just want to say amazing work. Really impressed the graphics that you did and the way that it's laid out and the way that you manage your team. But the one thing that you really need to be looking at and to improve is you really need to be looking at this. You're going to leave there on a Friday afternoon, and the only thing you're going to think about is
Yeah.
the
Yeah, it's a negative thing.
negative, because that's how our brains are wired. So once we're aware of that, right? Once we understand that, then we can identify when this is going back to the identifying negative thoughts and beliefs. Once we understand that it's just a fear that's holding us back, this negative bias, we can override that or reprogram our mind. So we start at that level. We start at why we do the things we do. Why do we do it? Why do we make decisions? Why are we frightened to present? Why we really deep dive into that. So we call it the foundational level of great managers or great leaders, right? And we do it through storytelling. So we don't just teach, we tell stories, and then people go into breakout rooms and we get them to discuss it and they come back with solutions. So the fact that so we're not telling them, remember, tell me and I will forget. We're involving them. Involve me, I will understand, I will remember. So we're constantly doing this involving storytelling. People remember stories, and we do that right throughout the program. So they get buy-in from day one because they can't say, "Oh, I'm not like that," because
Yeah.
all humans are like that. So you're slowly sowing the seed of I think that's a good idea. Oh, I'm capable of the results because we tell stories with people who are just like you. So I will tell a story about a client, one of our previous clients that were on a program, and this is what they were experiencing. And after this program, this is what happened. And it was non-professional. It was something in their personal life. So even though you're on a leadership course, this will impact your personal life. And it's that. So by the time they get to the end of the program, we have what we call them. We have people who absolutely believe that they are now better leaders, managers, better humans after the program.
Amazing. And if someone was listening right now and they're stuck in a place where they don't want to be and they're kind of making excuses instead of taking action, what's the first step that you'd suggest they take today?
What is it? What is the excuses? So I think write them down. What's the excuses that I'm making it, and then think of what's the exact opposite of that. What's the exact opposite of that, and then try and make that one of your dominant thoughts and beliefs. But normally, when something's holding us back, it's a false sense of fear we have.
Mhm.
Yeah, I believe the way that my brain works is nothing good happens in comfort zone. Nothing, right? It's just ah, and that's why we have huge mental health rates in the world, and people are so depressed and so anxious because we're living in this comfort zone, and nothing good happens in there. So we need to, once we accept that the only way I'm going to move forward and be happy is if I stop making excuses and I start taking action. Now, I don't mean go quit your job and go find something you love. No. What is it you love? How are you going to get there? Think about all the things. Why does it matter? Is it something you would do even if you never get paid for it? Try and find something and then put a plan. And that plan could be 6 months, 12 months, 18, 24. But try and have a plan because at least you're moving forward. So that's always what I say when people say to me, yeah, no, but okay, let's rewind. What if you could? I always repeat that to someone. No, I can't because, and I'll say that's okay, but what if you could? What would that look like? Oh no, but I don't know, James. No, but if you did know, what would it look like? Well, I think it would probably look like, because you've got to know something, right? This is how our brains work. You've got to know something to not know,
Yeah.
right? You've got to have a reference point. So there's something in your brain that's telling you no. So you've got to have a reference point to say to someone, but I don't know. No, no, that's nonsense. You've got to have a reference point in your brain of knowing something to not know. So yeah, it's just that the questions, asking
Yeah.
really great questions.
I think a lot of people don't take the time to just sit down and ask themselves those hard hitting questions. And that's where it all kind of begins. I really liked what you said on our um, call we had before this recording. What most people think is the easy path is actually the hard path because it leads nowhere. I found that really good.
Yeah, I mean, it's true though. If you think about all the paths that we've taken that we thought, oh, okay, I'll just date this way, it's easier. It leads to nowhere. That's the comfort zone again. It doesn't lead to anything good. And then I mean, a lot of people I wish I'd started years before, knowing what I know now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's something that I think that people now, we now have more choices in life than we've ever had before, but there's more fear
Yeah.
in life than we've ever had before that's holding us back. And I think that's it. As I said, it's the hard path is always the one that it's the most rewarding because
Yeah.
it's experience that we go through.
And I think with having more options, it can also become overwhelming. Like I have a younger sister who's 9 years younger than me, and because there's so many options and like your degree doesn't necessarily determine the direction you can head in, it can be quite overwhelming to pick something, just to even decide. But I always tell her that rather just pick something, even if you have a slight inkling that you may enjoy it, and head in that direction, and paths and other directions will appear from that. But you've got to sort of pick a direction to go in first, and then see what happens.
The thing is, Byron, we don't know
Yeah,
unless we try. And I think this is the thing that what happens a lot is people try it, it doesn't work out, and they give up too quick.
yeah,
Like we know that's not how life works, right? You've got to keep going, and you're going to get it wrong, and you're going to fail, and you're going to make mistakes. But you've got to just keep going. You've got to keep going because you never know what it is going to look like unless you keep. I mean, if I'd have gave up after 2 years, I wouldn't be sitting here today talking about the podcast, and the employees that we have and what the incredible business we've built. It's been able to going back to the voice, right? It's been able to overcome that voice and say, no, I'm in control here. Not the voice, me. I get to make those decisions. Some will be right and some will be wrong, but as long as you're learning, it's all good.
exactly. Well, before I end every conversation, James, I ask my guests if they have a question for me.
I do have a question for you, Byron. So,
Awesome.
what made you start the podcast in the first place? What was it that drove you to do this?
Well, it was liking the idea of identifying as someone who had ideas, who started things, but I really grappled and struggled with starting. There were so many fears and doubts and assumptions that I made. So I'd tell people about, business ideas and things, and 3 months later they'd ask me about it, and it kind of nothing had been done, and it became a self-identity issue. I was like, oh shit, do I just like the idea of this sort of entrepreneurial mindset, but am not really one? And the podcast was one of those, and it almost fizzled out. And I was like, screw it, let me just start it, but let me take a sort of meta approach because I have these fears and things. Why don't I have conversations with people who've gone out there, done it, overcome these fears and hurdles, and then hopefully I can learn about it. It can sort of normalize these conversations and things in my head, and then I can improve and be someone who then becomes a starter and who is a starter. And so that's why I started the podcast. Another part of it was I felt like I wanted to be a better speaker. I wanted to speak about these topics, and business is one of the topics that I'm really fascinated and interested by. So I wanted to improve speaking about business and chatting to people and having interesting conversations. And so that's been the motivation since I started, and I've loved every second of it. So yeah, that's why I started the podcast.
Amazing. I want to ask you one more question, if that's okay.
Sure, go for it.
What's the biggest lesson that you've learned in that journey?
Um, well, I think I achieved what I set out to achieve in understanding what differentiates entrepreneurs and people who want to be entrepreneurs. And the gap between them is actually really, really small. When you haven't started your own thing, you think that gap is huge and you've got so much to learn. You need to read all the books and you start coming up with all these excuses. Um, but you realize that, well, I've realized after speaking to a lot of people like yourself that it's more just an action muscle, and you flex it over time, and that gap shortens. It's not how many books you read, although books can help in certain industries, but it's flexing that action muscle and shortening the time between idea and action. And that's what differentiates entrepreneurs and successful people from people who want to be that. And that's my biggest lesson. And so throughout this podcast and like throughout the years, I've learned since learning that I'm just trying to shorten that gap. So every idea I have, let's see how I can test the market or test that idea, validate it in as short a time as possible. And I'd say I'm getting better at it. It's not perfect, but yeah, that's, I'd say, my biggest learning.
Absolutely. And sometimes people just don't get it. They don't see what you see, and I think that's another real big thing for entrepreneurs is they're able to visualize really clearly what it is they want and why they want it. At least it was for me. Once I had that really clear picture, Byron, nothing was going to stop me. Right? I was making it happen. That
Yeah,
was it. I was making it happen, no matter what.
yeah, exactly. Well, James, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. I really enjoyed our conversation. If people want to find out more about you and the Power Within training, where can they do so?
Website is www.thepowerwithintraining.com. On all our social media channels, it's the Power Within Training. So YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and also on TikTok. So it's the Power Within Training. So
Awesome.
Power Within Training is where you'll find us.
Great. I'll leave all those links below in the show notes.
Amazing.
Thanks.
Thank you
Thanks
so
again,
much,
James.
man. Really appreciate it. You have a wonderful day.
You too.
Thanks for listening. I really appreciate you making it all the way to the end. I hope you enjoyed the episode. One more quick reminder before you go. I have a weekly newsletter by the same name, Another Excuse, where I cover 4 topics: something that has changed my perception, a tool that could be useful to you, content that is actually worth consuming, and a concept that I try break down and explain. If this sounds of any interest to you and you need a kick up the arse, then you can subscribe at the link below. Thanks for joining me again, and I'll see you next week.